When planning out a project, we really want to think about the composition. Composition means the overall layout of the artwork. How am I going to fill this white space? Again, I often get beginning artists, they get this piece of paper, they make a little picture in the middle here that they focus on, and then they say, hey, I'm done, and all of this space out here is nothing, empty, boring wasteland. All right, that's not thinking about composition. We want to think about how do I fill up this whole thing. So when the viewer looks at this, they see artwork from left to right, top to bottom. The whole thing is visually interesting, okay? So one thing, and I'd mentioned in the rough sketching video, if you haven't watched that, go back and watch that, is orientation. And that was this right here. Notice when I drew my cat kind of sitting upright, I held the paper up and down. Because if I had drawn the cat sitting upright and the paper going across like this, it would have had all this empty space. So think about the orientation. If you're drawing a person standing up, you might want to hold the paper upright, okay? If you're drawing a shoe, that might want to go across this way. So think about what you're drawing and what the best way to hold the paper is. We call this style landscape or portrait. Doesn't mean you have to draw a landscape or a portrait. It's just what we call it, okay? Now, another thing to think of is what we call the rule of thirds. Rule of thirds is an easy way to think about where you're putting things on the paper. And to do this, lightly, holding the back of the pencil there, I'm going to draw a tic-tac-toe board on my paper, okay? And it does not need to have perfect straight lines, but if you're worried about it getting straight lines, go grab a ruler. Okay? And there you go. I've kind of created a little tic-tac-toe board. Now, what we're going to use this for is figuring out where things go. Again, often I get artists putting stuff right in this middle square, and that's the only area of focus. Now, what rule of thirds will tell you to do is to take that item that's in the middle and slide it over to one of these lines that you've made, taking that focus of that object over a little bit. Now, what's best is if you can have things that end up on some of these crisscrosses here. Don't try to get something on every one of them, okay? So let me just flip this over, for example, and say I was making a landscape and I wasn't thinking about my rule of thirds. And here we go, here's there, and here's a tree. Okay, I know that's a horrible tree, but I wasn't looking at anything. I hope that we're going to try harder and do better trees than that. Here's some grass, and that's often, a composition for a young artist. The item's right in the middle, not much going around it, not the best composition. Let's flip that over. Go back to our checkerboard here, and what it would say is try to use these lines. So instead of having the horizon going right across the middle, maybe I move it down here, and here's my horizon, okay? It doesn't have to be perfectly on the line the whole time, maybe it's some hills. And instead of having that tree right in the middle, maybe I move it over to end up on this line. And I'm gonna have it go a little bit bigger so that the big part of the tree here ends up right on this crisscross, okay? And now we can see I've kind of hit stuff on 3 of those crisscrosses there. Maybe if I was going to add something else, like maybe if there's a person here, maybe they end up down here on this crisscross here. So here's a person. Okay, and so they end up right on that crisscross. Of course, we erase the horizon. We can't see through there. All right, so there's using those rule of thirds a little bit more to your advantage and coming up with a better composition. Give it a try.